Oh, hello there. Yes. Well, my goodness, it's rather warm, isn't it? Yes. If you like that kind of thing. Mad dogs and Englishmen, I guess. Yes. Anyway, yesterday we had a lot of our centre-right commentators who, thankfully, due to various news events, were able to show off their deeply anti-racist credentials. All day long, most of them, in fact. Yes. With not a lot of news coming out about certain people being suspected of certain crimes, it was up to them to put in a very measured responses to exactly what they thought was going on. And you can really see the way that they are definitely very centre-right anti-racist types. Anyway, first out of the starting blocks was David Atherton, a man who, has spent most of his basic retirement tweeting about crime rates amongst various people. He's got a sort of criminologist hobby. Anyway, this was him. Anyway, this is Michelle Dweebs on GP News with a couple of other people. The latter described the EDL and Tommy Robinson as far-right. Bad, you see. Nigel, the reason Tommy Robinson left the EDL in 2013 was he could not get rid of the real far-right. One of Tommy Robinson's convictions is for assault. He headbutted a Nazi sympathisers because he would not leave the rally. This was him speaking in 2010, where he refers to a non-racist Britishness. No matter what colour of your skin is, we'd rather stand with one proud black patriot than 100 scumbag racists. Yes, you see. Tommy Robinson, yes. Now, I've never really thought of Tommy Robinson as being an anti-fascist, but apparently he's a violent one, which is bad, I think, yes. Anyway, yeah, I think part of the problem there with David, of course, is that almost anybody seems like an anti-racist next to David Atherton. He's the type of person that would have Adolf Hitler and David Duke gently backing out of the room because he's a bit extreme. Just a personal viewpoint, you understand, but perhaps not the best and most moderate voice we're going to come across. There was, of course, Carl Benjamin, who was putting up various tweets during the day. Yet another mass stabbing in which just quotes, a man is guilty. I'm sure the details of this will be entirely predictable. Yes, indeed, they are entirely predictable in the sense that it's probably not a terror-related thing in the slightest, and even though the colour of the skin, person's skin, may be a particular colour, it will probably have very little to do as to exactly what was going on. But I do like Carl here, again showing those deeply feminist credentials, because you see what he's reacting to here is the notion that men commit crime. And, obviously he has problems with that from that kind of feminist perspective. So, well done there, Carl. I think we should just describe any sort of suspects in any case as, if they're bipedal, as just primates. That might well cover that. I'm sure that will make Carl happier anyway, because then we could say it was entirely predictable. It was a hominid what did it. Yeah, there you go. You see, that will work, won't it? Paul Golding managed to do his usual stuff with being the proud patriot that he is. I do like the fact that he actually put up this thing that had gone out there briefly for about 2 hours, allegedly naming the victim, the perpetrator, as a member of a Iranian-backed a terrorist group, and this is where we get into the what should we do about this stuff type of territory. So he's put this out. If this is true, this cannot go unanswered. Yes, indeed. So I guess if somebody goes into a kindergarten and kills some people that are a Taylor Swift related event, then we need to bomb Iran. That's the only takeout I can have from that. I'm not entirely sure about it not going unanswered, unless it's some sort of callback to prayer thing or something. Loza Fox, perhaps inevitably, said, when is enough going to be enough? Which is one of those kind of interesting philosophical questions which you could ponder about anything, couldn't you? What will it take? Close the borders, do it now, have the police track down these murderous thugs and leave the law-abiding citizens of this country alone. We've had enough. Yes, indeed. But you see, the problem with that, with Lawrence, if you like, is that the suspect is actually in custody. So I'm not entirely sure what leaving law-abiding citizens alone and yet tracking down murderous thugs. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, because if it's people that haven't yet been murderous thugs, surely you're going to have to do things about the law-abiding citizens. You see, I think Loza hasn't really exactly worked through this particular thing, but I think what he means is something else. Yes. I'm not really sure. We had Peter Whittle from the New Culture Forum. Did have to like this. Okay, a shamefully low-grade analysis here. Yeah, the BBC was sort of like saying about Dublin. And when somebody went into a school and shot a whole lot of kids. Somebody who wasn't actually particularly dark-skinned. But anyway, shamefully low-grade analysis here, right? Thanks to both Islamic immigration and high rates of psychosis in other communities, mass stabbings are no longer extremely rare. Okay, except they are. And there isn't a great deal of evidence as such, unfortunately, shamefully high-grade analysis from me, that alleged rates of higher schizophrenia amongst certain populations of the UK may or may not actually be a thing, because it's in the home countries of like Africa and the Caribbean islands. Black people there have the same rate of psychosis as white people do elsewhere in the West. So I don't know if that's me being shamefully low-grade analysis. Probably, anyway. And the 1996 Dublin massacre was a mass shooting, not a mass stabbing. So there you go, you see. If you go somewhere, okay, and you kill a lot of people with a particular weapon, it's not the same as if you go somewhere and kill a lot of people with a particular weapon or something. Anyway, skillfully... high-grade analysis there from the New Culture Forum, probably. And finally, my favourite was Turning Point, inevitably, a group of people who will always be relied upon to never be racist about anything. So let's try and fight our way through this, because this is a humdinger, right? Here we go. Terrorists can be mentally ill. Okay. In fact, most terrorists are brainwashed and or mentally ill. Well, okay, but that's a kind of very subjective viewpoint, isn't it, in terms of are terrorists brainwashed? There are various prime ministers of Israel who would probably argue against that particular thing. It doesn't excuse what they've done. And again, I'd sort of refer back to various people in history. You think about events in Northern Ireland for about 30 years. But anyway, leaving that, it doesn't mean their acts aren't terrorism, and which is where we start to get into some slightly dodgy stuff, I think, here with Turning Point. So, in other words, if somebody's mentally ill, it doesn't mean that the act that they committed isn't terrorism, even if there's no evidence that there isn't terrorism. Which would introduce an entirely new perspective onto both mental illness and the notion of terrorism, and indeed a war against terror. Yes, stop gaslighting the British people. Okay, don't demean the victims. Call a terrorist a terrorist. Okay, but you see, what we need to do, Turning Point, is have a wider definition than simply somebody that does something that we find abhorrent. Otherwise, we'd end up probably calling people who don't pick up the mess that their dogs leave behind terrorists, because let's face it, that's deeply unpleasant to the people around it, and it doesn't. You can make excuses for these people, but realistically not. Yes. Anyway, there we go. It always does astound me that these people will swear blind that they're not racists, and yet, whenever they're given the opportunity to make sure that you won't think of them as being racists, they somehow manage to fall down. And for all these people who are heavily into the notion of, well, it's easy, you can just stop this stuff if you want to, they don't seem to have a lot of very practical solutions beyond basically using a lot of excessive force by the police against a group of people that they find a bit, a bit different. Yeah? And okay, you might well persuade me that Tommy Robinson really doesn't mind black people. Okay, but all the evidence we have is that the person what done this was born in the UK, were a British citizen, that they were black from a black African country, and that they are therefore very, very likely to be a Christian. So where does that take us with this? What exactly markers are we going to put up in terms of marking people as terrorists if it's as broad as that? That's a lot of people in the UK, isn't it? But maybe that's the point, eh? Maybe that's where we should be going. We should just label certain people as being dangerous outsiders. Not, of course, that Turning Point or any of the others would want to do that, because, hey, that would just be racist, wouldn't it? Anyway, do have a lovely midweeky thing. If you can do, enjoy.